Cool morning air whispered through the half-open shutters of the workshop, carrying with it the scents of pine and freshly turned soil from the fields beyond the village. The gentle rustling outside contrasted with the flurry of activity within. Leather scraps littered the wooden floor where the apprentice shoemaker labored, all in hand, carefully stitching the upper of a new shoe. Her name was Clara, and though youthful, her face bore the intense determination of someone enthralled by a craft she aspired to master. Pausing in her work, Clara stretched the kinks out of her shoulders and glanced at a small calendar pinned to the wall. In just 1 week, the annual Kittlevale Festival would commence, a celebration of the town's founding that brought traveling merchants, street performers, and throngs of visitors from neighboring counties. It was a source of pride for everyone who called Kittlevale home. In years past, her late father had contributed finely crafted boots and luxurious slippers to the festivities, winning near legendary acclaim. This year, the responsibility for her family's legacy rested on Clara's shoulders alone. The door to the workshop squeaked open, admitting a soft glow of morning light as Orrin, the head shoemaker, stepped in. He was old enough to have known Clara's father well, but moved with surprising vigor despite his years. "How are those festival shoes coming along, my dear?" he asked in his gravelly baritone. "I'm nearly finished with 2 pairs," Clara replied, smoothing the leather, "but I worry about being able to provide enough variety for the festival. Let's not forget the dancers will need special shoes, pairs that can withstand twirling on cobblestones." Arin nodded, running a knotted hand along the edge of the wooden table. "We may have bigger problems. Word around town says our blacksmith's shop is running behind schedule. It's not just about forging nails and horseshoes anymore. Apparently, Rowan's also in charge of all the iron stands for the festival stalls. If he can't finish, there'll be nowhere for vendors to set up." Clara's brow furrowed. The Kittlevale Festival was more than just a showcase of artistic wares. It was an economic lifeline for the struggling village. "I can't imagine the festival without the usual rows of booths," she said quietly. Orrin sighed. "Rowan's talented, but taking on multiple responsibilities at once can overwhelm anyone. Perhaps you ought to see how he's faring. Maybe lend support or strike a bargain if that's what it takes." She wiped her hands clean and set aside the half-finished shoes. Orrin was right. In a town as close-knit as Kittlevale, everyone helped each other. Her father had once told her that when the harvest was plentiful, he'd distribute free pairs of shoes to those who needed them most. In return, the townsfolk would provide wool, leather scraps, or even a day's worth of manual labor at the workshop. It was a cooperative spirit that had sustained Kittlevale for generations, and if the blacksmith was in need, she wanted to help if she could. Outside, the morning sun glinted off still damp cobblestones, and Clara weaved her way through narrow lanes lined with half-timbered cottages. She could hear the rhythmic clang of metal on metal before she saw the blacksmith's forge. Rounding a corner, she found Rowan at work, under a broad awning attached to his modest shop. Even among the swirling sparks and blazing furnace, Rowan's thoughtful expression was unmistakable. A tall figure with short dark hair constantly pushed out of his face, he wiped the sweat from his brow with one leather-gloved hand. His clothing revealed singe marks and smidges of soot, evidence of his labor from dawn until dusk, maybe even longer. Curiously, the clang of his hammer lacked its usual confident ring. Clara approached the edge of the awning, clearing her throat to announce herself. Rowan set his hammer aside, looking up from the horseshoe he'd been shaping. A faint smile relaxed his tight features upon recognizing her. "Clara," he said, his voice a warm, resonant note in the open air. "To what do I owe this visit?" She glanced at the half-finished iron stands stacked against the wall. Some looked solid, while others were little more than bent rods awaiting further forging. "I came to see how you were doing and to offer help if you need it," she explained. "Everyone's counting on you to finish these stands. How far behind schedule are you?" Rowan ran a palm across his stubbled jaw. "More than a few days, I'm afraid," he admitted. All the nails for repairing the festival stage had to come first. Then there was the order for cauldrons for the traveling soup vendor. By the time I managed to start on the stands, the day was nearly gone. He let out a breath, frustration creeping into his voice. And I still have blacksmith chores to do, sharpening plowshares, forging new hinges for half the doors in town. I can't keep up. Clara nodded sympathetically. Orem thought you might need a hand, or a trade. I'm uncertain how a shoemaker could assist in a blacksmith's tasks, but I'm more than ready to help in any way possible. Rowan studied her with eyes that glowed subtly like embers. It's not just forging stands, he said, tapping the anvil with a slow, pensive beat. Those festival booths need secure frames. A day or two of dedicated labor won't be enough. He paused, a flicker of an idea lighting his features. But your father was known not just for shoemaking, he also had a knack for contraptions, right? I recall him designing a mechanical treadle for stitching, using levers and pulleys. Clara remembered those contraptions well. The mechanical dancer he once built for a traveling puppet show, the foot-operated tools in the workshop that saved hours of manual labor. Yes, he tinkered quite a bit, she replied. He left behind a trunk of design sketches. Maybe I can find something there that speeds up your workflow? Rowan's expression brightened, though worry lingered beneath. If you can adapt one of those designs to help me hammer or bend the iron rods faster, that might be just what we need. In return, I could make the nails or metal studs you might need for custom festival shoes. People will want fancy details, especially for dancing. Her heart quickened at the prospect of collaboration. It's a deal, she said, reaching out and shaking Rowan's soot-blackened hand. Their hands lingered a moment longer than necessary, his warmth radiating through the gloves. She felt an unexpected flutter that had nothing to do with exchanging goods and services. That evening, Clara rummaged through the clutter in her father's old trunk, nestled under a rickety staircase in the back of Oren's workshop. Dust motes drifted in lantern light as she sifted through sketches of wooden contraptions, half-built prototypes, and battered journals. Some pages described intricate ways to make eyelets or faster lacing boots, while others contained half-finished ideas for cart improvements. Finally, she uncovered a handful of pages that showed a lever-based device, a foot pedal driving a weighted hammer. Her father's almost childlike scribbles introduced each section, describing how tension, pivot points, and properly balanced counterweights could speed repetitive tasks. These could work, Clara murmured. The blueprint indicated that if rigged over an anvil, the device would deliver swift, repetitive strikes for tasks like beveling rods or shaping rivets. Rowan could continue the delicate parts of forging, leaving the tedious hammering to the machine. If she could build it from sturdy enough metal, it might just become the cure for his backlog. Early dawn found her guarding those sketches like prize relics as she headed to Rowan's blacksmith shop. He had already lit the forge, and the air thrummed with heat and vigor. Without waiting for an invitation, Clara unfurled the designs on a broad wooden work surface near the anvil. "This is what I found," she said. "My father called it the pedal hammer, but we can give it a less silly name if you like." Rowan studied the drawings, eyebrows arching as he found himself impressed. "Your father, as always, was a genius," he said softly, running his fingertip along the line. "I can see how the weighted hammer would reduce effort. It's like having a second set of arms for the basic pounding work." Their collaborative energy sparked instantly. While Rowan bent rods and hammered out plates for the machine's frame, Clara measured angles, referencing the blueprint to ensure everything lined up. Occasionally, Rowan would slip behind her, gesturing for her to step aside, so he could manipulate a piece of iron. She was acutely aware of his closeness, how his presence ignited a pleasant warmth that had nothing to do with the forge's fire. They worked side by side for hours as the muffled drum of the foot pedal steadily took shape. Smoke mingled with the sharp tang of hot metal, and flecks of glowing slag hissed in water buckets. When midday approached, Rowan insisted Clara take a break. She obliged, stepping outside to breathe the cooler air and letting her hair tumble free from its tie. The faint ring of steel on steel continued behind her. Just as she was about to re-enter the workshop, Rowan appeared in the doorway, tapping the newly assembled pedal with a boot tip. "Ready to test this creation?" he asked, wiping perspiration from his brow. Clara grinned. "Absolutely. Let's see if it moves more than just air." They eased the contraption into place, aligning it with the anvil. Rowan laid a metal bar on the anvil's face, then pressed the foot pedal. The weighted hammer swung down in a practiced arc, striking with a forceful clang that surprised them both in its efficacy. The bar's edge deformed instantly. "This is remarkable," Rowan exclaimed, faint disbelief mingling with joy. "It's not perfect, but it's enough to handle rudimentary shaping. It frees me to focus on more detailed aspects." The relief in his eyes was palpable, only heightened by the moment of exuberance they shared. They spent the rest of the day refining the newly dubbed pedal hammer, ensuring it stayed stable and hammer strikes didn't veer off target. In time, Roan's backlog of iron rods and half-formed stands began to diminish. By nightfall, the stands were nearly complete, all hammered smooth within a fraction of the time it would have taken him alone. Though still exhausted, Roan looked elated, as though a great weight had eased from his shoulders. Clara lingered, practicing with the contraption and adjusting tension rods. Over supper, they shared a hasty meal of bread and cheese between reluctant bites. Both were far too focused on their work to properly savor food. They found themselves trading stories about their childhoods. Rowan recounted how he first learned metalwork from his uncle and almost burned down the forge at age 10. Clara laughed, imagining a pint-sized Rowan scurrying around with a bucket of water, trying to extinguish a small blaze. "Your father built this trunk of wondrous contraptions," Rowan said, "and you're quite the inventor yourself. Maybe you're following in his footsteps more than you realize." She lowered her gaze, a hint of sadness crossing her eyes. "I always admired his passion, but after he passed away, I worried I'd never live up to his standards. Even now, I often feel like I'm just fumbling through, trying to preserve what he left behind." "Maybe that's how real mastery starts," Rowan said gently. "A bit of fumbling, a pinch of fear, until you realize you've become who you were meant to be." A soft hush descended upon them, and with it came a moment of deep understanding. Their gazes locked. Clara felt a current that hummed with possibility. The air crackled, and a tiny, undeniable flutter stirred deep within her chest. Something intangible, like lines of fate weaving together, made her pulse beat faster. In the next days, they developed a steady rhythm. Rowan's forging tasks sped dramatically with Clara's new contraption. Steadily, the festival stands acquired a polished, uniform look. He hammered nails and studs for her footwear orders, and in turn, she constructed additional enhancements, including a small contrivance to help cut metal rods precisely. Their two crafts melded seamlessly, a synergy that neither had discovered working alone. Oren wandered by one afternoon, arms folded. He watched with approval as the pedal hammer clanged away, spitting sparks while Rowan shaped metal. Clara sat on a stool near the forge, carefully cutting and stitching leather while the contraption did the brute force labor. "I've never seen two people so in tune with each other's work," Oren remarked, raising his bushy eyebrows. "We might just have a festival after all." Yet, as the festival day neared, a new challenge surfaced. Preparations for the carnival rides, the performance stages, and the vendors all advanced steadily, but an unexpected complication arose with the local dancers. They had agreed to put on a special dawn performance in brand new footwear. Clara had meticulously designed dancing shoes with high-end metal studs in the heels for flair, courtesy of Rowan's forging skills. But when she distributed the test pairs for practice, the lead dancer discovered the shoes made odd squeaking sounds on the village's wooden stage. Distressed, Clara hurried to the dance hall, behind the communal barn, to investigate. All but a few dancers had gone home, leaving only Ellie, the lead dancer, perched on the edge of the stage. She wore a prototype pair of dancing shoes, beautifully embroidered with shining studs, but a single step sent out a high-pitched squeal. Ellie rubbed her temples, frustration clearly building. The steps we do for the opening number can't be overshadowed by that noise, Clara, she said with an apologetic shrug. Almost panicking, Clara kneeled to inspect the soles. The studs, made of Rowan's iron, protruded slightly, and as a dancer pivoted, friction set them squealing. Sweat dampened her brow. This was the best design she had, and there was virtually no time to re engineer everything from scratch. I'll fix them, Clara promised. I'll figure out a way to quiet that squeak. She ran directly to Rowan's forge. Night was falling, the sky deep blue, but Dalton, an assistant blacksmith, had left the coals hot. Rowan stood by the pedal hammer, finishing a final batch of wrought iron hooks. "You're working late," he said when he noticed her. "Everything all right?" A swirl of emotion roiled within her. She could only manage a tight, grim nod. "The dancing shoes squeak as soon as the dancers pivot. It's the steel studs. I need to redesign them." Rowan set aside his work, removing heavy gloves. "Let me see." He took a shoe from her, peering beneath. Because the studs sit at the corners, that's probably where all the friction is concentrated. If we could spread the contact area or add a buffer, like a rim around the studs, Clara finished his sentence. Something so that the metal on the stage causes less friction or doesn't scrape in the same way. He rummaged in a chest of scrap metal, producing a slender band of copper. Copper or brass might be softer, but still strong. We can shape these around the studs. The pivot might be smoother, so the squeaking is minimized. Her pulse quickened, not just from the urgency of the task, but from the closeness they shared as they pored over the small shoe together, leaning over the anvil. Rowan cut copper rings, heating them just enough to mold around the studs. Clara fitted them to the pair of prototype shoes immediately, using newly hammered nails to secure them in place. By the time they finished, the moon was high, bathing the forge in silvery light. They collapsed side by side on a pair of rickety stools, exhausted but determined. "I'll deliver these to Ellie first thing," Clara announced, stifling a yawn. "If this works, I'll do the same to the other pairs." She gazed up at Rowan. In the forge's flickering glow, he appeared almost sculpted from the same metals he worked with, each highlight and shadow accentuating his steadfast features. Emboldened by the quiet hush of the night, she let the wave of gratitude she felt toward him shine in her eyes. Rowan nodded, returning her look with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've done wonders for me. Let's hope these shoes keep that squeak away," he said softly. "You were the one who found the copper," she teased gently. "We're a team," he smiled. "We are." Early the next morning, Clara arrived at the dance hall with the updated shoes. Ellie tested them, spinning through her routine. When she halted mid-turn, there was no screech, only the soft patter of leather on wood. Tears of relief gathered at the corners of Clara's eyes. One potential disaster was resolved. But she still had the entire line of shoes to update, nearly a dozen pairs, and only 2 days before the festival. Rowan once again offered his help. Working from dawn to well after dusk, he shaped ring after ring of copper, which Clara affixed to each pair of completed footwear. She almost lost track of the hours. She and Rowan shared a single meal a day, warming bread near the forge or nibbling on dried fruit. Orin frequently reminded Clara to rest, but she pressed on. By the eve of the festival, the final pair was done. All around, Kittlevale transformed. Colorful buntings draped the shop fronts. Bright lanterns lit the streets, and laughter echoed far into the night. Vendors arrived with candies, pastries, and hand-woven scarves, setting up stalls on Rowan's sturdy iron frames. The festival stage soared, nails carefully forged beside the pedal hammer. Dancers practiced late in the community barn, spinning about in Clara's new shoes without a single squeak. A feeling of triumph and togetherness spread through the town, and yet, with the flurry of tasks subsiding, an electric sense of anticipation built whenever Clara and Rowan passed each other. Their partnership had grown into something deeper, something splendid that neither had fully named. The day of the festival dawned bright and warm. With the sun rising over rolling green hills, Clara stood at Oren's workshop window, her heart fluttering. It was tradition for local artisans to lead a parade down the main road, culminating at the festival stage for the opening ceremony. This year, she was to carry on her father's legacy, representing shoemakers. She felt both a surge of pride and a stab of nerves. Would her shoes be well received? Soon, villagers gathered at the starting point. A lively band marched in the lead, followed by dancers in shimmering costumes. Clara and Oren followed next, carrying a large banner decorated with a stitched image of a shoe and a blacksmith's anvil, symbolizing the year's extraordinary collaboration. And there stood Rowan, walking in step with the Blacksmiths Guild's banner. When their eyes met, he grinned as though seeing no one else in the crowd. Trumpets blared, drums pounded, and swaths of townspeople cheered. The parade advanced, winding through Kittlevale's thoroughfares. Spectators applauded the dancers' agile footwork, made all the more graceful by the squeak-free shoes. Kids clapped excitedly at the blacksmith's cart containing the pedal hammer, which Rowan had decorated with flowers. The contraption that saved the day seemed to charm the villagers as much as it had helped them. The entire town felt alive with shared admiration. Then came the festival's official opening on the main stage. Standing before the sea of excited faces, the mayor praised the efforts of Kittlevale's artisans. "Without our shoemakers and blacksmiths," she announced, raising her arms, "there would be no festival." She beckoned Clara and Rowan forward. "Today, we celebrate unity and craftsmanship, two values at the heart of our town." A thunderous ovation erupted. Clara's cheeks glowed with emotion. Standing so close to Rowan, hearing the crowd chant praises for their joint effort, she realized just how integral he had become to her life. Shyly, she reached to squeeze his hand. He squeezed back. Even among the throng of appreciative villagers, they stood at the center of their own quiet, shared triumph. When the formalities ended, the festival's real delights began. Musicians struck up lively tunes as dancers took the stage in swirling bursts of color. Vendors beckoned passers-by to sample roasted nuts, hearty stews, and sweet pickled fruits. The fragrance of freshly baked bread and spiced cider suffused the air. Merchants praised Rowan's new booth frames for their sturdiness and ease of assembly, while people admired the eye-catching detail in Clara's footwear. Her celebratory heels, accented with tasteful hammered studs, sold out within hours. As dusk approached, bonfires lit the edges of the fairground, and the biggest dance of the festival commenced. Young and old, locals and visitors, all gathered to partake or simply watch. After days of unrelenting focus, Clara felt the call of the music. She stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching couples glide and twirl. Rowan appeared beside her, gaze warm. "You've been working so hard," he said, inclining his head toward the dancers. "Perhaps tonight you can allow yourself a bit of fun." She nodded, heart pounding. "I'd like that." Rowan extended his arm, offering an invitation. She placed her hand on his, and they stepped onto the makeshift dance floor. The band struck a spirited tune. At first, she felt a pang of self-consciousness. She was not the best dancer, but Rowan's reassuring grip anchored her, guiding her into a graceful waltz-like movement. The hustle of organizers, the watchful eyes of the audience, everything faded into the swirl of flickering firelight. The glow of the bonfires cast dancing shadows across their faces as they rotated in unison. Clara realized that in Rowan's arms, she finally felt weightless, a sense of belonging pulsing between them like the steady beat of the music. He gazed down at her, and the tender brightness in his face stoked the embers that had been quietly glowing in her heart these past days. When they reached a gentler part of the tune, Rowan lifted their joined hands and gracefully spun Clara in a circle. Their laughter, unguarded and intimate, rang out among the swirling crowd. Overhead, strings of lanterns flickered amid the star-filled sky. Kittlevale had never seemed so alive. so filled with promise. The synergy of shoemaker and blacksmith, the forging of steel alongside the stitching of leather, had ushered in more than just a successful festival. It had kindled a flame of possibility in two hearts that, until then, had walked parallel paths without colliding. When the music tapered to a close, Clara and Rowan slowed their dance. The final notes blended with soft applause from the onlookers, though the rest of the dancers may not have noticed that moment's significance. Heart in her throat, Clara stepped closer, breath tangling with his in the warm evening air. Rowan brought a calloused, metal-scarred hand to her cheek, the gentleness of the gesture breathtaking. She felt her chest tighten as every hesitation melted away. In the hush of that shared moment, they exchanged an unspoken truth. Then Rowan pressed his lips to hers with disarming sweetness. Time stretched, the festival's lights, sounds, and cheering dulled into a background hum. All that existed was the tender spark between them. When they finally drew apart, the immediate wave of cheers and catcalls from the townspeople broke through the spell, sending them both into a bout of laughter. Even Oren was clapping, shaking his head with a wide grin. Blushing fiercely, Clara slipped her arms around Rowan's shoulders. Somehow, she didn't mind the onlookers one bit. With the festival at its peak, Rowan suggested a stroll through the quieter edges of the fair. They meandered past stalls lit by flickering torches, sampling sweet pies and mead. When they paused to watch a flame juggler, Rowan turned to Clara. "I never thought all those frantic hours in the forge would lead me to a new chapter," he said in a low voice that carried a gentle awe. "Working with you has changed me." She slipped her hand into his. "I felt it too," she admitted. "I thought I was just trying to carry on my father's traditions. But in building those contraptions with you, I discovered something all my own." The hush between them was filled with a quiet acceptance. Then, beneath arcs of swirling torches, they parted the crowds and headed back toward the main dance area. Fresh music filled the night. The dancing and merriment stretched into the wee hours, and when the last note finally ended, the festival grounds were still brimming with an energy that only comes from genuine communion. Eventually, Clara and Rowan parted ways for the evening, though neither wanted to. As she strolled toward the workshop, shoes slung over her shoulder, she cast a final glance at the forge's direction. If the two crafts could weave themselves so seamlessly together to salvage a festival, what might they forge over a lifetime? The next morning dawned gentle and golden, the festival continuing in a more subdued manner. Folks moved a bit slower, nursing slight hangovers and happy memories. Clara rose early to check on the leftover pairs of shoes in her workshop and found Oren chatting with a wide-eyed traveling merchant. He pitched some business proposals, praising the designs from the day before, and Clara found herself daydreaming about how her future might unfold. She no longer worried about overshadowing her father's reputation. Instead, she felt a new sense of purpose, as if her own story had just begun. Rowan arrived, having already made his morning deliveries and sharpened half a dozen tools. He hovered in the doorway, looking as if he might have raced the sunrise to see her. Without ceremony, he stepped inside and placed a small, handmade iron charm on her work table. It depicted a tiny shoe with a miniature anvil inside. "A token of what we built together," he said softly. She picked it up, touched beyond words, and set it in her palm. "It's perfect," Clara whispered. Their eyes met, and the swirl of intense gratitude, fondness, and anticipation rose in her chest once again. "Last night I realized that here, in this small town, despite the challenges, the rush, the sweat, we found something neither of us was looking for," Rowan said, taking her hand in his. "So let's keep building." Clara closed her fingers around his. "Yes," she breathed, unable to contain a hint of joyful laughter. "We'll keep building." Outside, the town bustled as the festival's second day unfolded. Music wafted down Kittlevale's narrow streets, and children rushed by with sticky hands full of candied apples. Merchants beckoned from behind their booths, now proudly standing on stands hammered into shape by Rowan's craft. Among all this happy chaos, Clara and Rowan shared a knowing look. Their own synergy had become part of the festival's tapestry, an unbreakable bond sealed by the forging of steel and the stitching of leather. And as they stepped outside, hand in hand, the bright future of Kittlevale seemed suddenly boundless, just as wide and welcoming as the path they would walk together.